Today's video was sponsored by Storyblocks Video. Canon's cheapest RF lens to date is actually an awesome lens. Now, I'm probably spoiling the rest of the review here, but the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 IS STM actually performs better than its EF counterpart, the EF 35mm f2 IS, plus the RF is actually cheaper than the EF. I mean, is that a big deal? For me, yes, actually. We're just not very used to seeing Canon RF lenses being actually good deals. Part of the charm of using a mirrorless system is having a small footprint, and I do think that the 35mm is the only lens in the RF lineup that makes me feel like I'm using a mirrorless camera again. Using this lens on my EOS R, the whole device becomes a smaller unit overall, and the lens is also not awkwardly extended outwards because I no longer have to use the EF to RF mount adapter, which also helps the camera feel more well balanced as well when you grip it. It's also probably one of the most lightweight configurations possible on the EOS R. And of course, being an RF lens, you get to enjoy the general benefits of using an RF lens, for example, an additional control ring, and you also get more control over the focus-by-wire response. But this also has a 0.5 times magnification ratio, so technically it's half a macro lens if you would. It can focus on subjects just a few inches away from the front element, which gives you a very decent close-up framing, so I really like how you can just go in for a close-up with this lens without having to worry too much about its minimum focusing distance. The front element does extend just over 1.5 centimeters at its minimum focusing distance, so don't get surprised by a sudden elongation of your lens. It's also got a very powerful 5-stop IS, which really helps out a lot when you're shooting handheld, which does happen a lot when you're shooting on a 35mm. I have personally gotten quite a number of sharp photos shooting handheld with this lens at rather slow shutter speeds thanks to that IS. Now, before we jump into the image quality of this lens, if you ever need to license some footage for your project, but you are looking for something affordable without having to compromise on that image quality, then you can get just that from our sponsor for today, Storyblocks Video. They have got an incredible collection of stock footage that is really easy to search from, and you can use them at your disposal anywhere you like, including YouTube. A subscription to their unlimited video plan is very affordable, and you get unlimited downloads of anything in the video member library, and that is studio quality footage up to 4K. But that is not all. You also get access to a collection of fully customizable After Effects and Apple Motion templates that can easily add production value to your content. Click the first link below to learn more about Storyblocks Video. So back to image quality on the RF 35mm, there's really nothing much to complain about. It's just good. It is sharp wide open, but not so sharp you start calling it a Zeiss Otis. It sharpens up ever so slightly as you stop it down towards f2.8, but it really doesn't get much better past that. Chromatic aberration is quite well suppressed, although you will still find traces of it if you look for it. Images have a very decent amount of contrast to them, and the bokeh looks quite pleasing as well. I would say this is very satisfactory for a lens of this range. I've got no complaints about the AF performance as well, even though this is driven by a stepping motor instead of an ultrasonic motor. The AF performance is still very snappy and very responsive. And like the rest of Canon's STM lenses, manual focus operation is focused by wire, and there's also no distance scale on the body of the lens like the one you would find on the EF version. And if we go ahead and compare the RF 35.8 to the EF 35 f2, they both look to be roughly the same size, although the EF is actually a tiny bit larger, despite having a slightly smaller maximum aperture. There is a 30-gram weight difference as well. The RF is ever so slightly lighter than the EF by a tiny bit, but it's actually incredibly hard to tell simply by picking the two lenses up. The RF has a larger rear element than the EF, but the EF has a much larger front element than the RF. They also have rather different filter thread sizes. It's 67mm on the EF and 52mm on the RF. The frontmost glass on the RF is also perfectly flat for some reason. It's almost like a protective layer that protects the actual front element. Even when we compare these two lenses in terms of image quality, in the center of the frame at least, I find them to be practically the same. Wide open versus wide open, I've compared them f2 versus f2. In the center of the image, they look the same. But if we go to the corners, I would say that the RF is slightly better than the EF. So from an overall standpoint, comparing the two, the RF most definitely has more advantages over the EF aside from just marginally better image quality, starting with the 1/3 stop brighter maximum aperture, f1.8 versus f2, better macro capabilities on the RF, and also slightly better image stabilization as well. The RF is rated at 5 stops and the EF is rated at 4. It's also cheaper than the EF quite significantly. The RF is $500 and the EF is $600. So in terms of overall value, the RF 35mm is almost a no-brainer. Except the RF does have one huge drawback, and I think you guys can already guess what it is. As of now, this lens only works on 2 camera bodies, the Canon EOS R and the Canon EOS RP. The RF mount is simply nowhere near as universal as the EF mount, which is compatible with so many cameras. So let me rephrase it, the RF 35mm is a no-brainer if you own an EOS R body. For me, this lens on the EOS R really is the perfect walk-around lens. It's relatively small and light, and it's got a very versatile focal length. It works for close-ups, it's great in low light, it has image stabilization, and it takes great images. I always find myself bringing just this lens with me when I'm going on a trip and I want to travel light. If I had one complaint about this lens, it would be how plasticky the focus ring is. You do feel it quite a bit when you hold the camera like this, and especially if you are manually pulling focus for video, then you would really feel it. Aside from that, I do find it to be a very tough lens to dislike. So that sums up my review of the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 IS STM lens. Still quite a mouthful for such a small lens. If you enjoyed the review, do consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon for more videos just like this, and I will see you in the next video. But until then, here's another video of mine YouTube thinks you should watch, or if you don't like a computer telling you what to watch, here's one of my latest videos.